Good morning, everybody. This is Maria Harvey. I'm the sunflower lead for Legend Seeds, and I'm also the account manager for Western North Dakota, and I'm based out of Bismarck. And with me today is Jed Wall. He is our counterpart over there at Nuseed, and Jed's located in the Breckenridge, Minnesota office for Nuseed. So we really appreciate you taking the time. And so with that, we're going to get right to it. So our mission and vision at Legend Seeds has always been to dedicate ourselves to providing you high yielding, consistent producing, top quality products that provide you with more profit potential than you can get anywhere else. And as part of that, we wanted to make sunflowers one of our offerings. And to do that, we have partnered with Nuseed. So Jed, if you want to take that away.
Yeah, just a couple things here. Legend has been a distributor of Nuseed since 2016 is when the partnership started. Prior to that, a little bit of background on the company and where Nuseed has kind of came from. Nuseed was founded in 2006. They started purchasing a few smaller seed companies globally, one in California, and they added a few transactions along the way, purchasing Seeds 2000 and 2011, and then continuing to evolve and purchase more companies. And the focus of Nuseed has been in their core crops has been sorghum, sunflower, canola has been a big one, and then we've added a few things in the last 5 years, which have been energy cane and camelina out of a company that was purchased, which is called Yield 10. So we've got 2 breeding stations in a molecular lab in the U.S. Our main station is in Rothsay, Minnesota. And those of you that attended Sunflower U would have visited that site. Our other site is in California, where all of our seed production is done and stationed out of Woodland. Currently, we're offering oils, con oils, confections. We're one of the unique companies that offers both Clearfield and Express Sun technologies along with Clearfield Plus. So it's a real unique thing about our company.
So today we wanted to focus on our planter and air seeder setup for planting success with sunflowers, and Jed's going to touch on that. We're also going to touch on agronomic considerations for sunflower planting, and that's including a lot of the basics. We're also going to talk about some of the things that you should scout for in the early vegetative stages and what to watch for. And we're going to cover pre and post spraying very briefly. Plus, we'll talk about how biologicals like Envita or Emphasis can boost your bottom line, and not necessarily all in that order. But Jed, you and I have worked together on sunflowers for a long time. And last week I asked you what were some of the main reasons why guys have, less than optimal stands. And I know that you've done a lot of work with planting equipment. Would you say that that is one of the top reasons why people don't have a good stand with sunflowers and what limits their yields?
Yeah, it all starts. Yield is like a chain, and if you lose a link along the way, you're gonna limit what you can do with your top yield. So, starting out, spend the time to get ready. Make sure you're in a good mindset when you start. Sometimes it's kind of a rush thing. Sunflowers sometimes get planted last, and people are in more of a hurry to get done to move on to other things than they should be. So it's one thing, especially this year, where it's going to be the biggest moneymaker for a lot of farms, where they're going to go backwards on other crops. They're going to go forward financially on sunflower, and they need to be prepared to hit the field ready. Take a breather. When you get done with beans or corn, take a second to reevaluate where your planter's at from where it started. A lot of parts wear out along the way. A lot of guys will start the year with everything in total check and basically drive themselves here. So take a break, go back through the planter, make sure you're ready to go. Obviously, and these bolts are pretty just standard. A well-maintained planter plants better than every crop, better. So not only if you start out with a planter that's running good, intended for sunflower, to plant everything better if you take the time to run your units through the testing and run all of your different lot numbers through to make sure you're set up for the best plantability percentage that you can get to. It's very important to be in check with your sunflowers, because through all the main manufacturers, their main purpose of row crop planters is to plant 2 crops, and that's corn and soybeans. That's 95% of their engineering budget. Everything else falls into another bucket: sunflower, sorghum, everything else. It's not a main focus. So it's kind of on our end to really dial into it. We find a lot of times in the business that plates other than what's recommended work better, and some of our own settings that we come up with for vac and eliminators and other things. We find that we can do a much better job than what the book says. Usually the book will get you to about 90%. With a little bit of tweaking, we can get to that 97 to 98%. And that kind of goes back to the point growers should be able to purchasing new plates. A lot of times guys are running on plates that are almost worn out or worn out. A little bit of an investment in a plate will go a long way. A lot of the manufacturers' plates cost anywhere from $30 to $60, and they'll last a long time. So just some of the real basics. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but make sure that your tires are inflated properly. Overinflation and underinflation can throw you off anywhere from an inch to 2 inches across the planter bar if you're not running things properly. Make sure that your planter is level from front to back and your parallel bars are actually running parallel with each other. So you want to make sure you're checking your closing wheel alignment, check your discs and openers for wear. A new disc is 15 inches in diameter. One that's worn out is smaller than 14 and a half. And this is another one that when we get to the end of the season, we've put a couple thousand acres on our planter. Sometimes we've worn the discs out, rough conditions. We're running on worn out before we get through the season without even knowing it, giving us a difference in up to 3/4 of an inch. And that being said, it turns us into ununiform emergence. And if we're planting too shallow, in certain cases, we're going to affect our root and stock integrity. So just a couple other things to make sure they're in good working order: our chains, bearings, and shafts. Make sure everything is properly lined and not binding, turning freely. There's no wobble in bearings, and everything is running tight and true. Another thing I want to make sure is all seed tubes and sensors are clean and functional. I should also have that we have the correct seed tubes in. Usually we're using standard tubes, but in some cases with the larger confections and con oils, we want to make sure that we've got the proper tube, and sometimes we need to go to the large curved seed tube instead of the standard to avoid binding, bridging, and plugging. Our roll cleaner should flow freely with a well-maintained pivot point and bearings. Residue left in furrow can change soil temperature and cause delayed emergence. So just a couple things on the planter plates. I sent this on our note last week on our market report. If you missed it, kind of broke it down to some of the main manufacturers. First thing you got to ask is how many acres I've got, how many acres do I have on these plates? If your answer is I can't remember the last time I replaced them, probably that they're worn out and they probably need to be replaced. So they are wear parts. They all have very unique wear marks on them to show you if it's worn out or not. A lot of wear bars, or they'll have a groove in them that if the groove is missing, it's shot. At the end of the year, there's a lot of things that should happen with your planter plates that sometimes don't. Don't stack them in a pile in the corner of the shop because they can warp over time. They should be stored vertically between uses. And a lot of shops you go to, you'll see guys that have bars that are hanging from catwalk in the shop or something, that hanging on a galvanized pipe or a pipe of some sort to keep them straight up and down. Another big point is that a lot of guys don't realize is some of the main manufacturers, such as a case, the plates are mated for the doors, and the doors and the plates are both replacement parts. So the plate wears with the door and it keeps it true. And if you're replacing the plate, you also need to replace the door with the case planter. Another just key thing is oftentimes the plates, the singulation will be thrown due to the fact if it's a warped plate or a plate that's cracked or has holes plugged or something, it's going to throw you off. So real quick, air seeders, it's a real small portion of our business, but an important portion of our business. Air seeders are a wonderful tool to get out across a lot of acres quickly, but they have their own challenges as we go through them. Most of the manufacturers, and this can vary, there's probably 20 different main air seeder manufacturers. Check your Rex, but most are 18 inches. If they're less than 17 inches, you need to replace them. Examine your firming and closing wheels, arms, check bushings, and make sure you've got good soil to seed emergence, which is standard. Another key thing with this one is really spend the time with the growers and have conversations about, going through the proper steps of calibration. It seems like every year we'll get a grower that will either massively overseed or massively underseed across a lot of acres. You'll receive a phone call, hey, I intended to plant 1,000 acres. I've only got 600 in and I'm out of seed. It's a good day for a seed salesman, but a bad day for a grower. So once it's in the ground, there's not much you can do about it. There's a lot of great aftermarket parts that handle singulation very well. Air Seeder Parts Direct has got some very nice tools out there that can really help you dial that in. So again, check your air delivery system, make sure the air system is operating properly, the fan works good, everything is clear of obstructions, cracks, and breaks. Check all your hoses, your distributors for wear, cracks, leakage, and blockage. And it's one thing that if a guy's got some off-season time, a lot of these air seeders have got unnecessary bends and necks and turns in them. A lot of guys will really spend time custom retrofitting them to put in some stainless steel piping to eliminate the dips and turns and kinks so there to help not have plugs and blockage going down when you're in the field.
No, definitely agree with you there.
So again, a lot of the stuff is the same from air seeders to planters. Make sure the bearings are all in good condition. Make sure your seed boots are within spec. More than a half inch is burned out the bottom, replace it. It's another thing. I think guys think some of these parts are forever. That's one of the things a lot of guys don't check. And the one way to easily check it is to use a tape measure and measure that the boot is less than 13. If the boot is less than 13 and a half inches, it should be considered for replacement. And again, that varies. That's the 90% rule. There's a few other ones that use different boots out there. Follow what your manual says. We just kind of touched on this a little bit earlier. Make sure you've got the proper beading roll for the proper application. They are also wear part. Clean off any foreign material. And then, as you're running, it's always a good idea to run the yard. Another thing I'll add to this, if you think you have your proper meter roll in, run the yard on top of the ground, go back and check to see what shape your seeds are in. I've seen a few times where guys have had the wrong meter rolls in and they've actually turned into a hammer mill and busted kernels and negatively affect their stand. We also mentioned this earlier. Make sure you've properly calibrated your meters. A lot of guys will calibrate, and the best way to do it is to calibrate from where you're using your seed counts to where you're at, and then take a step back and go and do 10 acres with a set amount of pounds. Come back to the yard, clean the planter out top to bottom, reweigh, do the math, and make sure you're close to where you want to be. Do some tweaking and make sure that you're on top of it so you're not overseeding or underseeding.
So, when we're looking at planting sunflowers, we really do have to look at rotation. It's extremely important because sunflowers do not have or have not had some of the checkoff money put into them like some of the major crops like soybeans. And because of that, and because of the nature of sclerotinia, so sunflowers share sclerotinia white mold, that same white mold as soybeans, field peas, canola, and potatoes is another one. Sclerotinia is actually a pretty major crop. There is a whole initiative dedicated to studying sclerotinia and how to best handle it and keep it from limiting yields in those major crops. So we have found that sunflowers should not be planted on soybean, field pea, or canola stubble. And in some areas, crop insurance will actually tell you that it is not an insurable crop. That is a conversation you really should have with your crop insurance agent, because it's a bad day when you find out that you have made a decision that you cannot reverse, and it could potentially cost you a lot of money. We find that sunflowers perform best when seeded in the small grain or corn stubble. 2 to 3 non-broadleaf crop years between sunflower crops are really recommended. That can be anything from any type of small grain to things like millet, sorghum, sudan, and corn. Sunflowers actually follow corn extremely well. The thing you really have to watch is carryover restrictions. And Jed, you and I have both seen this through the years. I figured you would maybe give us some feedback on this.
Yeah, so it's one thing that gets overlooked that can be your most costly mistake of the year. There's a lot of herbicides, especially that we use in corn, that have an 18-month restriction. So it's something that it's worth the time to talk to the growers, especially this year. We've seen like we've had this pop up more times than not with growers that are coming back to the crop that haven't grown for 2-3 years and are asking questions about atrazines and other chemical and chemistries that they're just not well suited for sunflower rotation. So go back, look 2 years, a minimum of 18 months, 2 years, look back what you've done, what you've put on it, and make sure you can kind of track it to save yourself some headache going forward.
Yeah, and I'll just add, for those of you who have cattle, one thing to really watch, especially in dry years, is CRP hay. If you bring in CRP hay and we're in a drought, be careful where you feed your livestock. A lot of CRP has been treated with products like Grazon and Toradon, which have very strong limitations on broadleaves. And those are not products that break down in the rumen of cattle. So if you feed cattle in a field and you're using CRP hay, just be aware that just spreading it out or spreading manure of fed CRP hay can carry enough Grazon or Toradon or products similar to that, that you can actually not only eliminate sunflowers, but almost all of your broadleaf crops for a couple of years. So if you're in western areas and you have livestock, make sure you think about that carefully before you go spread manure or feed hay out in the field. And wide match and those similar products, I think Perfect Match is another one, Jed. You know, when we get west of US 83, there is a moisture restriction. You have to have had so much moisture in the last several months since application for it to be able to break down. One way that you will know that you have a possible carryover restriction hurting the stand of your field is when it's very uniform. If it's pretty much taken out sunflowers on the entire field, it's most likely a herbicide carryover issue, not a seed problem. That's been my experience. I know, Jed, I think you've seen that too. It's a sad day when someone's planted a field of sunflowers and there are no sunflowers. So when we get into planting conditions, we should plant sunflowers when soils are 50 degrees or higher. Jed, you want to touch on why we don't like putting sunflowers in cold ground, less than 45 degrees?
Yeah, it can affect our emergence and timing of emergence. And the one thing, that's different, sunflowers, other crops, our growing point, the cotyledon, is above the ground. So if we get up, we get a frost or freeze, we can lose our stand. And it's a bad day for a replant. So another note, we'd like to plant sunflowers at 2 inches of depth in place of a good moisture if possible, but not mudded in. And the reasoning for the two-inch depth requirement is we've found over the years that gives us a lot better stalk and root strength, a lot better integrity. Too shallow will get us some issues with lodging and other things that are undesirable. We've had guys that have went considerably deeper than that, but the deeper you go, the more inconsistencies you'll find with your emergence and the more inconsistency you'll see in your stand. And Maria, I don't know if you want to talk on the planting date across the board with who you've got on the call here today.
Yeah, so it's going to vary on your area. Obviously, there's areas of Texas that have already planted their full season crop.
Oh, holy shit.
The PNW, they will go as early as now. Most of the Dakotas in that we don't really get going here until at least May 10th. Actually, most of the window happens in that May 20th to May 30th time frame. Usually right around Memorial Day weekend is typically the height of sunflower planting up in the Dakotas. Biggest thing is you want to be within 2 weeks of your latest frost date. So you can go as early as 2 weeks before your final frost date. Jed, maybe you want to touch on, because I know we're going to have this question this year because we are pretty dry in some areas. Guys will often ask, should I plant into moisture if it's below 2 if I'm dry? What would you suggest to guys in those situations?
I would say there's two big answers to that. It's within reason and discretion. I mean, you've got to know what your soil type is. You've got to kind of know what the long range forecast is. I mean, if it's a difference of going from 2 to 2.5 to get to moisture with no real moisture in sight, probably not a bad program. But if you're tempted to go to moisture with rain in the horizon, I guess I wouldn't do it. You know, it's risky business to go really push them deep. You could have the exact opposite of what you want to happen, get a pounding rain or something, and end up not emerging at all. So.
Yeah, no, and for those guys who are planting into heavier soils that are more prone into crusting, what's been your experience with that?
I would stick with the 2-inch depth and not deviate.
Okay, so on planting rates, you know, most of North and South Dakota, we look at oils at 20 to 24,000. Con oils, we go less, 17 to 19,000. Confections, we go 16 to 18. There are maybe some organic folks on this call, and typically organic folks will go up to 10% higher to compensate for cultivation. And in our higher elevation areas, eastern Wyoming, eastern Colorado, in PNW, the Dalles in that area, a lot of times our rates may be as much as 20% lower. It just depends on your precipitation zone is a lot of it, and the timing of your precipitation. With that, Jed, maybe you want to touch on why do we go lower with con oils and confections versus oils?
It's pretty simple. It's for sizing, and everything needs to be looked at when you're signing a con oil or confection contract. In some cases, it's straight across the board. You're getting paid the same dollar per pound from start to finish. In a lot of cases in confections, the processors will motivate you by giving you a split contract that pays you more for your large seeds and less for your small seeds. So we want to focus on what our contract states and what your processor's goal is and match your goal with their goal so you get your most profitability per acre. One thing that's often forgotten is you know, the replant spectrum and looking at where's our economic breaks on population. There's no significant loss in yield in sunflower until you hit 12,500 plants. And the reason we don't plant it to hit 12,500 every year is because we'll match yield, but we'll have, you know, less plants, so there'll be larger heads that will have issues in the fall with dry down and harvestability and things along that line. So that sweet spot is what we're shooting for to match up with what our contract is looking for.
Yep. And in my experience, and I know we've had that discussion, if you're shooting to go into the oil crush market and your oil percentage rates are really what are driving you, you want to be towards the high end of that oils range. And it doesn't really matter on your row spacing, whether you're solid seeding or you're using a planter. 24,000 is kind of our upper limit. Would you say, Jed? I mean, there's really not a benefit like corn to going into that higher population.
You know, there's a few guys that do it. I mean, you know, that 24,000 in a row situation is pushing to be a little bit high. But you know, I know there's a lot of guys that go out with solid seeders that plant slightly higher than that. You know, the risk that gets involved, you really start pushing population. A lot of it comes down to knowing the hybrid that you're planting. All hybrids really react to population differently. Is you'll lose stock and root integrity when you get to that high population, and it seems like you know, a thinner plant will have disease easier. That density in the canopy will add to rust issues and other things that will negatively affect you.
So these are our final planting dates. Now, obviously, this is just for your risk management. And I would say nowadays, most of the crop is in much before this, June 10th up north, and it progresses as we go further south. The earlier you can get your sunflower crop in, though, typically we've seen you have better test weights and yields. So, you know, there's lots of guys who will go in right after corn and start planting their sunflowers because the ground by that point is warm enough. And I know there's some select areas of South Dakota that want to wait because they're concerned about decties. But then those guys typically have lower reported test weights and can have lower reported yields. So sunflower is a crop that the more time you give it, it will reward you in yield, test weight, and in cases oils as well. So Jed, we've seen it. We've seen it happen. Once we got sunflower herbicide tolerance, guys got tempted to go away from pre's. But would you ever tell somebody who wasn't an organic grower, because obviously they run a different program, would you ever tell a sunflower guy to go without a pre?
No, it's the cheapest insurance policy you'll ever buy in the crop.
Yeah, so there are several pre's available. A lot of them contain sulfentrazone, which is your Spartan. And we usually pair that with glyphosate. In your experience, Jed, what's the greatest amount of time you've seen where it really works out well to go out and do a pre ahead of your planting?
I guess, the best case scenarios, and it's all comes to matching what pre you're using in the situation, is if we can get out early and get to, a decent shot, not over the top, not, torrential rainfalls, but a nice shot of rain to get it activated and get it established before we're out in the field planting.
So with your conventional guys, because I'm working primarily with no-till guys, what suggestions, especially with tillage pre-plant in your seed bed prep, do you want to point out to conventional growers especially?
I mean, there's really no smoking gun with tillage. I mean, I haven't found anything that has really stood out one way or the other, better or worse for tillage in front of the pre-plant program.
Okay. No, one great resource that Jed and I access a lot is the North Dakota Weed Control Guide. It's published by NDSU. You can just Google 2025 North Dakota Weed Control Guide sunflower. It'll take you to the sunflower section. It'll give you pretty much every product that's labeled for sunflower, all the major ones anyway, and give you an idea of what you can use in the crop. Of course, you're going to need to check for your state because not all products are licensed in all states, and talk to your local chemical retailer because they're going to know more about the weed spectrum you're trying to target and what's been working in your area. So Jed, I'm going to let you touch on fertility today.
Alrighty. So this is just kind of some high level stuff here. And we'll get to it as well, but just a quick side note is the best tool that's out there is NDSU's nitrogen tool. It's a one-click deal, gets you into their format, put in what you've got in your different root zones, and it'll give you a recommendation. But just kind of off the top, just the easy math stuff when a guy's thinking about nitrogen for fertilizer is in the Northern Plains, North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, is 5 pounds available N per 100 pounds of expected yield. So that being said, if we're looking for an 1,800 pound yield, which is extremely low, we're going to want to make sure we've got 90 pounds available. And that's what we apply and what's in the soil. And one recommendation we always make with people is to look at your soil mapping at least to 24 inches. Sunflowers are a mining crop. And if we're following corn or something that we had an aggressive nitrogen program on, if we've had some leaching, we want to chase that nitrogen, put it to work, and put it in the bank. High plains are slightly higher. It's an additional 2 pounds. So Colorado, Kansas, Nebraska, Wyoming, Texas, Oklahoma. We're looking at an additional 2 pounds above that to get to the same yield goals. And as I mentioned, we want to make sure we're taking into account all of the N down to 2 feet.
So this is in reference to that publication you were talking about, Jed. So North Dakota went to 3 zones, and that's publication SF 713, Fertilizing Sunflower from NDSU. It's very specific to North Dakota, but one of the things that it does do is go through the revised sunflower fertility recommendations, which I think everybody can benefit from. And part of that they have mentioned is sunflowers will respond to sulfur on lighter or sandier soils. I know I've personally seen that. And Jed, through the years, we've worked with people who've manured their ground, or they have quite a bit of manure out there. And I know you work pretty closely with the National Sunflower Association. What are the kinds of things that they've really talked about on watchouts when having too much fertility out there?
Well, the big thing with too much N is sunflower is different than corn, where corn you can continue to throw nitrogen at to build bushels and until you go broke. With sunflowers, our tipping point is around 200 to 225 pounds of N. When we get to that excess level, we'll make the sunflower go crazy, vegetative tall. We'll get diseases in that you haven't saw before. The lodging will go crazy, and we'll have just one issue after the other.
Yeah. So, some folks will ask about boron. Should I use boron on sunflowers? They've done some research on it. We haven't really seen much here. Just in my general experience, because there are states where your crops do respond to boron. I would say if you're in a state where you have seen a response to boron in other crops, then you can consider it in sunflower. North Dakota is just really not a place that we have a lot of that. And we get asked about this all the time too, Jed. Starter fertilizers. Folks often ask, can I use starter? Can I use it in furrow, or should it be 2x2 off, in between the furrows? If you want to touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, the 2x2 is always the best. I mean, sunflowers are extremely sensitive to nitrogen, especially applied directly to the seed. So the cotyledon is very sensitive. It's easy to burn them off. So you got to be very careful with how much N you're putting down near the seed. Like I said, the note here below 10 pounds is still an accurate rate to put anywhere near the seed. So phosphorus, they were revised again in 2022, and just a step back on fertility. There had been essentially no real in-depth work on sunflower fertility since 1977, and NDSU came back in 2022 and finished kind of where their study was, reevaluated a lot of things. Some things were the same, no change, but there was a few that were a few minor tweaks. But there's very little response to applied P. Actual crop use and nutrient removal is very, very low on sunflower, so it's not one to get too fired up about. The use of phosphorus shows no negative effects, so starter can be applied if necessary. Some of our common starters with this one are 1034 aught and 1152 aught. And again, keep it below 10 pounds. Potassium, I'll keep this one simple and save some time. They don't respond to potassium. Deficiencies are not common.
Yeah. Now they have updated this a little bit. This was, I don't even remember when this was done. I think 80s time frame. But they've now revised the phosphorus removal rates as low as 10 pounds an acre on a 2,000 pound crop. The reason why I included this here, though, is just to show that most of what goes in the seed is your nitrogen. That is the biggest component of yield. One of the reasons why we like including sunflower in rotation is because of its mining effect and its ability to bring your potassium, your sulfur, your magnesium, and especially your calcium up from down in the depths of the soil and bring it back up to the top. This calcium here is a big reason why a lot of folks feel that their crops or their fields are more mellow, especially in a heavy wheat rotation, because as we apply nitrogen fertilizer throughout the years, we tend to push that calcium further and further down into the soil profile, and it can raise the acidity, especially in strong no-till areas that are dry, like the Palouse and Southwest North Dakota is another area where we see it a lot, where we can really see pHs decrease and get into those sub 6 ranges, even into sub 5s, and having that calcium be brought back up to the top of the soil, recycled back to the top, can kind of help buffer out pH a little bit, but really help make that soil more mellow. And so that's included there for that. So as you see, this nitrogen is a big component of the yields that we see in sunflower, and managing nitrogen is important we talked about the drawbacks of front loading it. And so one thing that we have found through the last several years is we could really optimize our yields using biologicals that contain gluconeosinobac diazotrophicus, which we offer in 2 different products, one called Emphasis and the other called Envita. So Gluconeosinobac diazotrophicus is a nitrogen-fixing bacteria. It was actually isolated out of sugar cane by a team of scientists from Britain in 1988, and they've been working with developing a specialized strain that really captures that atmospheric nitrogen and converts it into plant available form. One thing that makes this particular strain of bacteria unique is it is not a root colonizing bacteria that only stays in the roots. It's a bacteria that will actually spread throughout the entire plant throughout the growing season and colonize cells throughout the entire plant to fix that nitrogen and provide that supplemental nitrogen to the plant kind of on an on-demand basis as it requires it. And we at Legend here have been working with this bacteria since 2019, and we have found that it works well in a variety of crops, including corn and soybeans, alfalfa, potatoes, and sugar beets, not only in aspects of yield, but in aspects of quality, crop quality as well. So how this bacteria works is it enters the plant through the root zone if we apply it in furrow by colonizing the plant starting with that radical root, or through the leaf stomata when you apply it foliarly. It is tank mix compatible with most fertilizers and herbicides, fungicides and insecticides. There are just a few watch outs. UAN would be one of them, and urea another. The thing that we've seen with sunflowers is it works really well. Sunflowers have large leaves, lots of surface area, lots of photosynthetic capacity. And the thing that we were cautious about when we first trialed it is because of what we've seen with sunflowers responding to an excess of nitrogen in the soils, are we going to see negative impacts on standability? Are we going to see more disease? Is the crop going to get extremely tall? And those are not things that we've observed with using Envita or now Emphasis. So, but what we have seen is the increased yield, and in a lot of cases, we've seen increased oils as well. So here's a case study that was done back in 2021, and there was a drought up there in north central North Dakota. You can tell by looking at the yields that it was definitely not a typical year. Those guys typically run 2,400 plus pounds, but that year it was a pretty significant drought. The untreated check that we had that year ran 951 pounds, but our treated portion of the field was 1,479 pounds on average. That gave us a yield increase of 528 pounds. And when you consider the economics of what 5 extra hundredweights do to your bottom line, it was really quite good. The other thing is we had a positive impact on oils. This is a picture of the field. These are actually Nuseed's 470s. So then in 2023, we had this gentleman here, Jesse Morgan, who's one of our customers. He is from the Camel Tinta, Minnesota area, southeast of the Wahpeton Breckenridge area. He put Envita on his crop. He happened to plant Nuseed's N4H 422s and the 470s. And this was a quote from his feature in the National Sunflower Association magazine, The Sunflower. He said, from what we're seeing as we haul loads in, there's a 2 to 3 bump in oil and a 200 to 400 pound bump in yield. And he wasn't even done taking in his crop, but things were looking really quite good. And we've had some very positive feedback from the oil processors that once they figure out that Envita has been used, they're very appreciative. So with that, let's just do some Envita math. I use 2270, 100 weight. That's just based on local high oleic beds in the Eastern Dakotas. And we're just going to do some basic math using 150 pound per acre yield gain plus 1% oil. So over here on the left side here, without Envita, if you had a 2,000 pound yield and 44% oil, you get a 2-for-1 premium on your oil for every 1% over 40. So because we're 4% over 40 oil, we get an 8% premium on the oil, which is 108% of the cash bid of 2270, which means you're actually getting paid 24.52 a hundredweight. So on a 2,000 pound crop, you're grossing $490 an acre. If with Envita, say you add 150 pounds of yield and 1% in oil, you're now getting a 110% of the cash bid because you're getting a 10% premium, which means you're actually getting paid $24.97 per hundredweight. And then on top of that, you're now getting paid on 21.5 hundredweights, which means you're grossing $536 an acre, meaning you're netting an additional $46.46 an acre. And that's a conservative estimate. This is more in line with what a lot of our customers have reported is a 300 pound gain with a 2% bump in oil. And you can see that, you go from $490 to $584 an acre, meaning you're gaining a gross profit from using the Envita or the gluconacetabacter of 94.26 an acre. So that's a 6x return on investment with your Envita or your Emphasis product. So why the two? Both of these products, Envita and Emphasis, both contain the gluconacetabacter diazotrophicus, and they're both sold in packages that treat 40 acres at a time. They also both offer a performance guarantee. So we have the two formulations of Envita and Emphasis. They're both gluconacetabacter diazotrophicus products. They both treat 40 acres, and they both offer a performance guarantee. The big difference on the two is Envita is a liquid formulation, and you do really need to use it in the season of purchase because the bacteria is live in this formulation. This is the one formulation that we have that is OMRI certified. So for you organic growers, you can absolutely use this product, and there is an OMRI certificate for it, so it will not disrupt your certification. We find that it works best if you add it to the tank last. That gives you the most living bacteria and the longest window, and you should try to use up that tank within 24 hours, especially if you have some higher salt things in there, fertilizers, certain herbicide products that are salt-based, etc. Big thing on this, don't freeze it. Keep it out of the sun and try to keep it at temperatures below 80 degrees because the more temperature fluctuation you expose it to, the more of that high heat you expose it to, the less viable population you will have going on your crop. Emphasis is the new wettable granular formulation that is offered through Yieldmaster Solutions and Legend Seeds. It does have a 2-year shelf life if you store it properly. One thing that's nice about this is the bacteria is in a dormant stage, and you do get a measuring scoop with it. So you can measure out 5-acre increments, which is great for those of you in places like Michigan where you have smaller fields. That way, if you're going to get disrupted or you want to split it between crops, you can. Again, we suggest that you add it to the tank last. The wonderful thing about that is you have maximized your amount of viable bacteria once you add it to the tank and it gets activated. If you don't use the whole package, you should seal it as tightly as you can, get as much air out of it as you can. Put that whole package inside a Ziploc bag on top of it, put it in the fridge just to keep the temperature stable, and use that within a short period of time, days to, a week or two. Don't let it get past a month, really, to optimize your performance with it, and keep it out of the sun and at temps below 80 degrees. So, and I should just mention, whether you use your Envita or your Emphasis in furrow And in sunflower, so we talked about the starter and how that's best in 2x2. If you're going to use Envita or emphasis in furrow, it really does need to make contact with the seed. So if you have like a split tail Keaton seed firmer, you know, put that tube that's going to go right on the seed, put your Envita or your emphasis down with that, and put your fertilizer in that top tube that's 1.5 inches above that, or apply that off to the side. We find that the Envita or the emphasis works really well with our sunflower herbicides that we use in crops. So, you know, don't be afraid to use it at that stage. It works out very well. So when your crop is emerging, sunflowers come out with a rounded cotyledon. Now they actually look a lot like soybeans when they're coming up in that VE stage. And then after that, they're followed by 2 pairs of pointed leaves. True leaves are pointed and 1.5 inches long. If you're in an area where cocklebur is very common, one of the ways that you tell it apart from cockleburs got a pointed cotyledon, and they have those purplish stems, and their stems are hairy, where young sunflowers really don't have much for hairs on them. So that's one way you can tell the difference there. And besides planting error, in my experience, and Jed, you can maybe back me up on this, I have found that cutworm is probably my greatest cause for replants. These are some pictures of what cutworm damage actually looks like in a field, and this was in a soybean stubble field down by that Ashley, North Dakota area here a couple of years back. One thing you'll see over here is this is what the stem looks like when it's been chewed off below the ground. It looks kind of palish white, and you can actually see that the top of it's been chewed. When you're looking at emerged plants and they're young, this is often what we see. You can see that there's been chewing along the cotyledons. And in this case, this other half of the cotyledon is missing. And often if you dig around a plant that shows this kind of damage, you can often find the cutworm really close by. Here it's just, you know, 1/2 inch or 1 inch below the ground. And this is what they tend to look like in the Dakotas area, especially, though there are different species of cutworm. And cutworm can be even more prominent in fields where you are next to pasture or CRP, large grassy areas, etc. So cutworm, you want to scout for them at emergence around dusk or in the early morning because they do feed on the ground overnight. And then when the temps start getting higher in the daytime, in the sunshine, they go underneath plant material in the field or bury themselves down in the ground. They can be very hungry, and in small fields, it doesn't take very long for them to start at the margins of the field and really work their way in. You need to spray in that dusk to dawn time frame to get them while they're above the ground and get that contact with them. And if you want to know more about which products work well for cutworm, I would suggest checking out the insect field control manual from NDSU for North Dakota, and that'll give you a list of products that are labeled to control cutworm in sunflower. So when we're staging sunflowers in the vegetative stage, each true leaf is counted as a V stage. So if you have 2 pointed leaves that are more than 1.5 inches long, those are true leaves, and so on. And once they hit that 4-leaf stage, they really bolt. So don't drive by and go, well, my sunflowers only look like they're 8 inches tall, I should be fine. This is not a corn crop. And Jed's seen it too. We've seen sunflowers that are 12 inches tall that are 8 leaves. We've seen sunflowers that are 18 inches tall that are 6. And so you really need to hit it during that stage. We have 2 post-control systems in sunflowers. One is Clearfield, made by BASF, and that includes Clearfield and the Clearfield Plus. That was introduced in 2004. Beyond Extra is our herbicide. It used to be just Beyond. And some of you are also familiar with it as being known as Raptor in soybeans, but we use a 4-ounce rate in regular Clearfield hybrids. You can go up to 5 ounces in a Clearfield Plus. the difference there too is 4-ounce rate. You're using non-ionic surfactant. When you go into a Clearfield Plus, you can actually heat that up a little bit with some MSO. And your window is 2 to 8 leaf stage. That's why it's so important that you know how to stage your sunflowers. The Beyond does have some broadleaf and grass control. The other option is the Express Sun system that was released by DuPont back in 2008. It uses Express herbicide. This is a broadleaf weed only system. It really does a nice job on Canadian and Russian thistle, and it does a very nice job. When you get into grasses, you can use clethodim, and that is not stage specific. So the last thing we want to just touch on is in the spring, we can encounter some downy mildew. This used to be one of the biggest reasons for replant, but thanks to genetic resistance and the addition of awesome seed treatments like Planaris, we really don't encounter it much anymore. But this is a disease that impacts sunflowers at emergence for those first 4 to 6 weeks or so. The seed treatment does a tremendous job of getting us through this emergence stage and into further development now. And with Nuseed, they offer an excellent lineup of downy mildew resistant hybrids. And these are all their DMR options that are currently available and that we have some supply of for this year. So with that, we really appreciate your time with us today. Make sure you reach out to your local Legend Seeds rep. If you don't have a local Legend Seeds rep, please call the office. You can check us out at legendseeds.net to contact us and find a rep for your area. So we really appreciate your time, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day and be safe during this planting season.